Welcome back. Tonight, we're going to step gently into another time, into the heart of Victorian London. But not the London of polished brass and glittering halls. No, this is the other side. The London of narrow streets, of soot-dark skies, and rooms so small that families slept shoulder to shoulder. It was a world most people tried not to see, a maze of tenements and alleyways where thousands of lives unfolded in quiet endurance. Yet even there, amid the smoke and the struggle, life carried on. People worked, loved, argued, dreamed, and found meaning in the smallest things. In tonight's story, we'll wander through those forgotten streets, not as tourists, but as quiet observers. We'll listen to the rhythm of daily life, meet a man whose story could have been anyone's, and uncover the traces that history left behind. So, settle in, dim the lights, let your thoughts slow down, and as the world around you grows still, we'll drift together into the past to find the soft, human heartbeat that once echoed in the shadows of a Victorian slum. The dawn breaks slowly over the city, and yet the slum has never truly slept. Somewhere beyond the haze of chimney smoke, a pale light stretches across the rooftops, glancing off rain-slick tiles and trickling down narrow lanes that twist like forgotten veins through London's East End. The air is damp, thick with the mingling scents of coal dust, stale bread, and the faint metallic tang of the nearby Thames. In one such alley, a woman stirs before the first light reaches her window. Her name could be Mary or Anne or Eliza, names that fill the census pages of the age like echoes of one another. She rises from a straw mattress shared with two of her children. The room is scarcely large enough for the bed, a small table, and the stove that struggles to hold a fire. On the mantel, a chipped mug holds a sprig of dried flowers, a small defiance against the greyness that surrounds them. She moves carefully, so as not to wake the others. From a tin pail, she pours the last of yesterday's water and sets it to boil, feeding the stove with a handful of cinders and paper scraps. The sound is faint, a soft crackle beneath the distant rumble of carts outside. She will boil the same kettle again at dusk, reuse the same water until it is too clouded to serve even for washing. The city stirs in waves. First, the labourers, those who must queue at the yards before sunrise, waiting to be chosen for work. Then the costermongers, pushing barrows heavy with wilted vegetables or cheap trinkets. Later still, the small hands of children darting through the streets, selling newspapers, flowers, or matches. Each coin they earn a fragment of survival. If you listen, you can hear the language of the slum, 100 dialects all softened by the hum of morning, the slap of boots on wet cobbles, the creak of cartwheels on uneven stones, the murmur of women at the pump, filling tin cans, their breath rising in clouds against the chill. It is not a peaceful sound, but it is steady, a rhythm of endurance. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of the street. The houses lean toward one another as if conspiring. Their walls are streaked with soot, their windows clouded with grime. Yet here, life flows like water, finding its path through cracks in stone. A small boy, perhaps 8 or 9, runs barefoot along the gutter, chasing a hoop made from a bent iron ring. His laughter is brief, but bright, a moment of colour in a grey morning. A woman calls after him, her voice softened by fatigue rather than anger. She has seen too many mornings like this to waste breath shouting. Further down the lane, an old man sits at the doorway of a doss house, his shoulders hunched beneath a coat several sizes too large. He holds a clay pipe, long extinguished, and watches the street with eyes that see little but remember much. He once worked the docks, perhaps, or the rail yards before age took his strength. Now he lives by the day. A penny earned shining boots, another begged from passers-by. Inside the cramped rooms above, families begin their day's work. In one, a widow and her daughter sit by the window, mending clothes for a tailor who lives 3 streets over. The needle flashes faintly in the dim light, and the thread squeaks as it is pulled through the fabric. They are paid by the piece, a few farthings for each finished garment, and so they work without pause, speaking little, their thoughts as worn as their hands. Down the street, the air grows warmer near a bakehouse. The smell of bread, dense, coarse, made from cheap flour, drifts through the air, mingling with the scent of soot. A few children press their faces to the window, watching as loaves are pulled from the oven. Most will not taste such bread today, but the smell alone is enough to make them linger. The day lengthens and the slum grows louder. Horses clatter past, pulling wagons heavy with coal or refuse. A knife grinder calls out his trade, turning his wheel with rhythmic precision. In a nearby courtyard, women kneel over tubs, scrubbing linen, until the water turns grey. The slap of wet cloth echoes off the brick walls, sharp, repetitive, almost hypnotic. There are sounds of quarrels too, but they rise and fall quickly. Neighbours live close here, too close for lasting anger. The walls are thin, and every cough, every whispered prayer, every sigh is shared. In this intimacy of poverty, privacy is a luxury few can afford. By afternoon, the streets grow sluggish with heat and soot. Children gather around the public pump again, splashing water over their faces, laughing despite the taste of iron. Some chase rats down the alleyways, others sit in doorways, staring dreamily at the world beyond. A world they've heard of, but will likely never see. And yet, for all its hardship, there is a strange beauty here. The slum lives by its own rhythm, not of comfort, but of constancy. Neighbours share food when they can, or news, or sorrow. A woman might nurse a sick child that isn't her own. A man might share the last of his tobacco with a stranger. Small mercies, unnoticed by history, but they keep the world turning. As evening descends, the fog thickens again. Gas lamps flicker to life, halos of weak yellow light that barely touch the darkness. The narrow streets glow in patches, revealing glimpses of faces, tired, soot-marked, yet somehow tender in the half-light. Men return from work, shoulders slumped, hands blackened from coal or grease. Their pay, if they received it, goes quickly. A loaf of bread, a candle, a pint of gin. The pubs fill with murmurs and soft laughter, with the clink of glasses and the low hum of songs sung out of habit more than joy. Outside, women linger near the railings, shawls drawn close. The air grows colder. The smell of rain returns. The streets are alive with whispers of debt collectors, of sickness, of hope that never quite dies. In the rooms above, families gather around the dim light of the fire. The kettle hums softly again, the same one from the morning, its sound mingling with the sigh of the wind against the window panes. Children drift into sleep one by one, curled beside one another for warmth. A mother hums quietly, not a lullaby exactly, but a tune without words. Something she remembers from a time before hunger and smoke. If you close your eyes now, you can almost hear it, the whole slum breathing together. The creak of rafters, the shuffle of footsteps on old wood, the distant rumble of a train carrying others far beyond these streets. The rain begins to fall again, soft at first, then steady, washing the grime from the rooftops and into the gutters below. And beneath it all, the rhythm continues, the rhythm of life, of labour, of quiet resilience. Each day ends as it began, with survival. Tomorrow will be the same, and yet somehow that sameness is its own kind of peace. A fragile human order in a world too vast to care. The lamps flicker once, twice, then dim. The city exhales. Somewhere in the distance, Big Ben tolls the hour, its deep note carrying faintly through the mist. In the slum, most do not hear it. They are already asleep, or nearly so, wrapped in the shallow comfort of shared breath and borrowed blankets. And so the night settles again over London's forgotten corners, heavy, dark, and strangely calm. The world above may glitter, but here, beneath the soot-stained eaves, life endures quietly, endlessly, in the soft pulse of the Victorian slum. The slum, like the city around it, is filled with countless unnamed lives. Most pass without record, a line in a census, a birth in a parish register, a burial in damp earth. Yet now and then one life can stand in for many. Let us linger for a while with one such life, that of Thomas Weaver, a name chosen not for its fame, but for its ordinariness. He could have been any man of the East End in any year between 1860 and 1890. His world was the same maze of narrow streets and restless toil we have just wandered through. Thomas was born in the winter of 1858 in a single room on Flower and Dean Street, one of the poorest in London, S. Spitalfields district. The room faced an alley where rainwater never quite drained away, where rats moved freely through the night. His father worked at the docks when work was available. His mother took in laundry, filling the small space with steam and the smell of lye. As a child, Thomas grew accustomed to the constant noise, the trundle of carts, the bark of costermongers, the shrill whistle of steam engines echoing from Whitechapel Road. At night, he could hear the bells of St. Mary's faintly through the fog. Life, even in its harshest hours, had a kind of rhythm, the endless turning of work, rest, and want. By the time he was 10, he was old enough to help. He joined the other children who scoured the streets for cinders or scraps of coal. Some days he sold matches. On better days, he carried buckets for a bricklayer and returned home with a few pennies and hands raw from lime. He had no schooling beyond what he learned by ear. Numbers, names, the weight of coins. He could spell his own name, slowly, when asked. In winter, his family slept huddled together to keep warm. The walls wept with condensation, and frost crept along the window glass like pale vines. Yet there was laughter sometimes. When his father came home with good pay, or when his mother sang softly as she worked, her voice echoing off the brick walls, warming the room more than the fire ever could. By 14, Thomas was already considered a man. Childhood was a brief interval in the slums, a luxury that could not be afforded for long. He found work at a rope walk where lengths of hemp were twisted into rope for ships bound for the Empire's far ports. The air was thick with the smell of tar and fibre, and the long halls echoed with the soft hiss of twisted strands. It was repetitive work, but steady. For the first time, Thomas brought home regular wages, just enough to buy bread, rent, and occasionally a candle of his own. He began to take pride in small things, a clean collar on Sundays, a pocket knife kept sharp and shining, the way the ropes he made held firm against the strain of ocean winds. On summer evenings, when the light lingered long past the hour he finished work, he walked along the riverbank. The Thames was not clean, even then. It stank of refuse and life. But the movement of the water soothed him. He would watch the ships drift by, their masts silhouetted against the red sky, and wonder what it would be like to go wherever they went. He never did. Few from the slum did. The ships needed ropes, but not rope makers. By his mid-20s, Thomas had married a woman named Ellen who worked as a seamstress. They rented a single room together near Mile End Road. It was small but clean when they could afford soap, and brightened by a single window that looked out over a courtyard filled with washing lines. Their first child, a boy, came in 1883, a second, a girl, followed the next year. Life settled into a rhythm once again. Work at the yard, supper of bread and dripping, the slow climb of fatigue through the body. He woke before dawn each day, often before the city's first bell. His boots, cracked and blackened with tar, waited by the door. Ellen would already be awake, mending by the light of a tallow candle. Their words in the morning were few. The quiet exchange of two people who knew there was nothing new to say, yet everything to be done. At the rope walk, the air was always thick. The hemp dust clung to the lungs, and the tar stuck to the skin. The overseer's voice carried down the line, but after years of labour, Thomas barely heard it anymore. His movements were mechanical, sure, his hands knew the work better than his mind did. The hours passed in a blur of motion, the day marked only by the sound of the noon whistle, and the ache that deepened in his shoulders as evening neared. He was not unhappy. Few in his position thought of happiness in such terms. There was satisfaction in survival, in bringing home enough to pay the rent collector, enough to feed the children, enough to keep the small flame of life alive another week. On Sundays, when the yard was closed, he would take his children to Victoria Park. The grass there was thin and trampled, but to the children it seemed endless. They would chase one another in circles, their laughter ringing faintly across the open space. Thomas would sit on a bench, boots dusty, arms crossed, watching them. For a few hours the air smelled of flowers rather than coal, but the slum did not allow long reprieves. The winter of 1886 was one of the worst in decades. The frost came early and stayed long. Coal grew scarce, wages fell, and the yard dismissed half its men. Thomas found himself among those turned away. Each morning he went back anyway, waiting in line outside the gates with hundreds of others, hoping for day work. Sometimes he was chosen, sometimes not. On the days he wasn't, he wandered the docks or joined the queues at soup kitchens. Ellen worked longer hours, her eyes red and swollen from sewing in the dim light. Their small savings, a few shillings kept in a tin, vanished quickly. The rent came due again. The landlord raised his voice, the constable followed. They moved then into a shared lodging, one room for 5 people, airless and damp. The children coughed at night. Thomas stayed awake, listening to the sound, unable to do anything but wait for dawn. And yet, even in those long months, life went on. The neighbours helped one another where they could. A loaf was divided among 3 families. Someone shared tea leaves already brewed once before. The kindness was quiet, but it endured. In the spring, the yard reopened. Thomas returned to work, thinner now, his hands trembling slightly. He did not speak much of that winter afterward. In the slum, suffering was not a story to be told. It was simply what was. As the years passed, Thomas grew older than most men of his trade. The dust in the rope walk had settled in his lungs. His cough came often, especially in the damp months. But he continued to work, to climb the narrow stairs to the same small room, to warm his hands over the same weak fire. By the 1890s, London was changing. The first electric lights appeared in the city's wealthier streets. New laws spoke of better housing, of health and sanitation, of reform. But for the slums, change was slow, like light filtering through fog. Thomas lived to see one of his children become an apprentice carpenter, a small victory that filled him with quiet pride. When he spoke of it, which was rare, he would nod once and say only, "He'll have cleaner hands than me." He died not long after, in the same room where his children had been born. His name appeared in no newspaper, no parish memorial, no ledger beyond the one kept by the undertaker. Yet his life was the city's life, one thread in the vast weave of labour and endurance that built the age. If you walk those streets today, or what remains of them, you might still feel a trace of Thomas's world beneath your feet. The cobblestones are gone, but the ground remembers. Beneath the polished facades of modern London lie the layers of lives like his. Countless men and women whose stories were never written, but whose labour held up the city like unseen pillars. Imagine him now, sitting once more on that bench in Victoria Park, the air quiet, his children laughing. The light softens around him, the day fades into evening. He watches, not with joy exactly, but with peace, the peace of a man who has done what he could. The sun dips behind the rooftops and the sky turns the colour of old parchment. The city exhales again, as it has for centuries, and Thomas Weaver, rope maker, father, husband, survivor, becomes one with its quiet rhythm, his story drifting into the gentle sleep of time. Imagine the city long after the people have gone. The smoke has cleared, the walls have fallen, and the narrow streets are buried beneath centuries of new stone. The noise of industry, once deafening, has faded into the soft murmur of time. Yet beneath it all, the earth remembers. Every broken plate, every clay pipe, every fragment of fabric has a story to tell. Small, quiet echoes of the lives once lived above. Archaeologists who have sifted through the soil of London's forgotten quarters have found these traces, not the treasures of kings, but the relics of the poor. And in their simplicity lies something more profound than grandeur ever could be. In one excavation at Whitechapel, a team uncovered the remains of a cellar that had once been a family home. The walls were blackened by centuries of soot, the floor packed with layers of dust and coal ash. Within that small space, they found a child's shoe. Worn through at the heel, its leather stiff and cracked. Nearby lay a small clay marble, still smooth to the touch despite the passing of more than 100 years. That marble, so ordinary, so fragile, may once have rolled across a stone floor as a child laughed in the dim light of morning. Perhaps it belonged to a boy like Thomas Weaver's son, or a girl playing quietly while her mother sewed by the window. In its stillness, buried for so long, it carries the echo of a life once bright and immediate. Alongside it, they found fragments of pottery, cheap earthenware bowls chipped and burned from long use. One bore a faint floral design, barely visible beneath the grime. It may have been bought second-hand from a market stall, cherished nonetheless for its small beauty. In a world of grey walls and soot-black windows, such details mattered. Every object tells a fragment of the same story, that even in the harshest places people made homes, they kept keepsakes. They found moments of grace in the smallest things. Imagine yourself standing by as the archaeologists brush away the layers of soil. Each discovery brings the past a little closer, not in shouts but in whispers. A thimble bent from years of use. A shard of glass from a medicine bottle, faintly tinted blue. The iron frame of a lantern. A penny flattened by a passing train. Each of these carries an intimacy that history books often overlook. They are the remnants of hands and habits, of people who lived without the expectation that anyone would remember them, and yet they endure. The archaeologists speak of context, of layers, of soil composition, of datable artifacts. But the truth is simpler. Beneath every layer of ash and brick lies the residue of daily life, a pattern of movement, a rhythm of work and rest, a memory perhaps of a song once hummed by a fire that no longer burns. Among the most haunting discoveries are the written fragments, not letters, for few could afford paper or postage, but scrawls upon the walls themselves. When certain tenement blocks were demolished in the early 20th century, workers found names carved into the plaster, initials scratched into door frames, small messages left behind. Some were prayers, some were declarations of love, some were simply names, a way of saying, "I was here." One such inscription found on a cellar wall in Bethnal Green read, "Better days will come." It was carved roughly, the letters uneven, as if made with a nail or a broken knife. No date, no signature, just those 4 words, hidden in the dark for over a century. It is not a cry of despair, but of endurance, a quiet hope that outlived the one who wrote it. And perhaps that is the most remarkable thing about these remnants. They reveal not just how people lived, but how they endured, not through strength alone, but through small acts of imagination, humour, and belief. Life in the Victorian slum was as much spiritual as it was physical. Faith, of one form or another, permeated every room, every street corner. In some houses, a small Bible sat beside a candle, its pages yellowed, its words half-remembered. In others, charms and tokens hung by the doorway, a horseshoe, a lock of hair, a cross made of twigs. Superstition blended easily with religion. People whispered that certain alleys were haunted, that the restless spirits of the dead lingered near the workhouses. Mothers tied red ribbons to their children's sleeves to ward off sickness. Old women sold potions brewed from herbs gathered at the edge of the city, promising to ease pain or cure bad luck. It was not ignorance, but adaptation. In a world where the forces of fate seemed vast and uncaring, these small rituals gave a sense of control. They transformed suffering into something that could be managed, at least in spirit. And even amid hunger, art found its way in. Street musicians played fiddles outside the gin shops. Ballad singers wandered from corner to corner, their songs carrying stories of love, war, and loss. A few pennies could buy a tune, and for a moment music lifted the air above the slum's heavy smoke. Children made their own toys from scraps, dolls of rag and wood, hoops made from barrel rings, whistles carved from bone. Their laughter echoed through the alleys, faint but enduring, as though insisting that joy had a place even here. Time softens everything. What was once harsh becomes distant. What was once unbearable becomes part of the great, slow murmur of history. But some memories remain stubborn. The smell of damp brick, the feel of worn wood beneath the fingers, the sound of rain on tin roofs. Archaeologists uncover objects. The imagination uncovers lives. For every pipe or cup unearthed, there is an untold story behind it, someone who drank from it or dropped it or kept it safe until the day they had to leave. The slum, once dismissed as filth and failure, now reveals itself as a tapestry of resilience, and perhaps that is its mystery. That out of deprivation, an entire culture of endurance was born. Not grand, not celebrated, but real. The culture of the ordinary. Even now, beneath the polished streets of modern London, remnants of this world remain. Builders sometimes uncover cellars that smell faintly of coal and mould, their walls still black with soot. Old maps show street names long since erased. Little Pearl Street, Angel Gardens, Frying Pan Alley, names that once rang with laughter or anger or song. It is easy to forget that our cities are built in layers. Beneath each new foundation lies another story. Beneath progress, memory. Beneath the bright glass towers of today, the dark, patient silence of those who came before. The archaeologist's brush moves carefully across the soil, uncovering not just fragments of clay and bone, but fragments of humanity itself. The world of the slum, once hidden and despised, returns at last to the light. Quiet, humble, and still faintly warm from the touch of human hands. As the dust settles on the excavation, imagine standing there yourself. The wind passes softly through the ruins, stirring the air that once filled a home. The city moves on above, unaware. But in this small corner of earth, the forgotten have spoken again, not in words, but in whispers of clay and ash. Their message is not of tragedy nor triumph, but of endurance. That life, even when reduced to fragments, persists. As the night deepens over the slums, a different London begins to stir. A world only a few streets away, yet separated by a gulf of comfort, light, and silence. Imagine, if you will, walking from the narrow alleys of Whitechapel toward the broad, gaslit avenues of Mayfair. The air changes first, cleaner, cooler, carrying the faint scent of polished wood and horsehair instead of coal smoke and waste. The streets widen. The cobbles give way to smooth stone. The houses grow taller, their windows unshuttered, their lamps burning evenly through the night. These are the homes of the clerks, the merchants, the gentry, those who read about poverty in newspapers but rarely feel its chill on their skin. In these grander districts, mornings begin not with a scramble for warmth, but with quiet precision. Curtains are drawn back to reveal neat gardens, trimmed hedges, and the steady flow of carriages along the boulevard. Servants move like ghosts through the halls, stoking fires, carrying breakfast trays, sweeping floors already clean. At 8 o'clock, the master of the house descends the staircase, the soft click of his boots echoing on marble. His paper awaits, the Times, folded neatly beside a pot of tea. He reads about the same city where Thomas Weaver once worked, about urban blight, about the condition of the labouring classes, words that sound detached, almost foreign. Perhaps he looks up from the page and glances toward the window where the morning fog rolls in from the east. He cannot see the slum from here, though it lies barely a mile away. The fog hides everything equally, the grand and the grim. His wife, dressed in fine cotton, sits nearby embroidering by the light of the window. The room smells faintly of lavender, of polish, of quiet comfort. They speak in low voices about the day ahead, a luncheon perhaps, or a call from a friend. Outside, a boy in livery waits with the carriage, ready to take them to Hyde Park. This is the other London, not wicked or cruel, merely distant. It moves at a slower pace, shielded by habit and wealth from the sharp edges of survival. Its people rarely mean harm, they simply cannot imagine the absence of safety. To many in the West End, the slum exists as a rumour. They read of it in the Illustrated London News, hear of it in charity sermons, or glimpse it from the window of a passing hansom cab. The stories that reach them are softened by distance. The poor, the deserving, the unfortunates. Occasionally, a lady of means visits an East End mission, her skirts lifted carefully from the mud. She writes afterward of what she saw: the dark dwelling, the ragged children, the hopeless air of decay. Her words are earnest, her pity sincere, and yet she returns home to a world of carpets and warm hands, unable to carry the chill of that other place with her. To the poor, these visits are both welcome and strange. The charity brings bread, sometimes, or coal, or a prayer. But it also brings the reminder that they are seen, briefly, and then forgotten again. Yet even in the city's division there are crossings, places where the two Londons meet without realizing it. The river, for instance, is one such boundary. Barges that carry silk and sugar to the West End docks are loaded by men from the East. Their labour makes luxury possible, though their names are never known beyond the wharf. The same coal that heats the parlours of Kensington blackens the lungs of those who mine it. The bread that fills the table of a banker is kneaded by the hands of a girl who has never tasted it fresh. At dusk, the carriages of the wealthy roll homeward across the bridges, their wheels passing over the same stones where barefoot children scavenge for scraps. The city is a single organism, its heart divided but still beating together, one side feeding the other. Let us wander now softly through one of the grand houses as the evening settles. The drawing-room glows with gaslight reflected on silver. Music drifts from a pianoforte, gentle, measured, almost wistful. The guests speak in low tones, their laughter subdued, polite. Outside, a hansom driver waits, watching his horse's breath rise like steam in the cold. Beyond the glitter of chandeliers, beyond the velvet curtains, the same fog drifts over both worlds. It seeps through cracks in tenement walls and curls through the marble gates of Mayfair alike. It levels everything in time. Inside, a woman in white silk plays a nocturne by Chopin. The notes rise and fall like sighs, delicate as candlelight. For a moment, the air is still. The same stillness that somewhere far away settles over a slum after midnight. In one world, a child sleeps beneath a down quilt. In another, beneath a patched coat. In one, supper is served on porcelain, in the other, eaten from tin. Yet both worlds dream beneath the same sky, breathe the same air, are bound to the same city. The divide is real, but it is not absolute. Servants move between these realms every day. A cook from Stepney, a maid from Whitechapel, a coachman from Limehouse. They carry traces of one world into the other. The smell of coal, the rhythm of labour, the quiet dignity of endurance. Sometimes at night, when the last lamp is extinguished and the city falls silent, it is hard to tell where one London ends and the other begins. The wind that blows through Belgravia is the same that rattles the shutters of the East End. The same bells toll midnight across both. Victorian London prided itself on progress. It was the heart of an empire, the seat of invention and ambition. Yet for every new railway, every grand building, there were lives like Thomas Weaver's, anonymous, unrecorded, the quiet price of that progress. The reformers would come in time. The slums would be demolished, replaced by new housing and wide roads. But the spirit of that older city would never entirely vanish. Its rhythm, the rhythm of work, of endurance, of quiet survival, would linger beneath the surface, shaping the London we know today. And now imagine the whole city as night deepens, from the river to the rooftops, from mansion to alley. The lamps fade one by one. The horses rest. The factories fall silent. The great clock of Westminster tolls 2, then 3. In the east, the slum sleeps, restless but still. In the west, the drawing rooms stand empty, their fires dying to ash. All of London is hushed, breathing softly in unison. The fog settles once more across the Thames, wrapping the city in a blanket of silence. The rich and the poor, the remembered and the forgotten, share the same dark, endless night. And as the last echoes fade, the city dreams of what it was and of what it might one day become. Now, as we draw this long journey to its quiet end, imagine the city slowly fading once more into stillness. The rain has ceased. The air is heavy but calm. From far above, the rooftops of Victorian London appear like a patchwork of slate and shadow. Silent now, the hum of life stilled beneath the soft breath of fog. the slum, that restless heart of endurance, is dark. The fires are low, the streets empty, the last cart long gone. Within the narrow rooms, people sleep as they always have, tightly packed, sharing warmth and air. In their dreams, perhaps the city is kinder. The walls are wider, the air cleaner, the hunger less. And beyond them, in the great houses and the wide avenues, others sleep too. Beneath their fine sheets and heavy drapes, they drift into the same quiet surrender. The distance between these two worlds, so wide in waking life, closes entirely in sleep. The city, divided by day, unites again by night. In stillness, in breath, in rest. Time moves on as it always does. The slums of London were cleared away, street by street, brick by brick. In their place rose new buildings, new promises, but beneath the pavements traces remain, layers of life, pressed gently into the soil like pages in a closed book. Every time a foundation is dug, every time the ground is turned, the past rises again. A piece of pottery, a child's toy, a nail, a coin. They are small things, but they whisper of everything. They remind us that beneath every polished surface lies an older story, one built from endurance, not grandeur. The city remembers its people, even when we do not. It remembers the sound of their footsteps, the rhythm of their work, the way they made something of nothing day after day. If you listen now, wherever you are, perhaps you can still hear it, faintly, like an echo from a great distance. The sound of boots on wet cobblestones, the creak of a cartwheel, the gentle hiss of rain against a tin roof. The world you live in now is quieter, safer, cleaner, but it is built upon the same human persistence that filled those narrow streets, the same longing for warmth, the same search for meaning, the same small hopes that carried people through each long day. When you turn on a lamp, when you draw a curtain, when you listen to the hum of the city beyond your window, remember that this comfort, this peace, was earned through generations who knew neither. And yet they dreamed of it. Drifting toward rest now, let your mind drift gently back from that fog-covered London. Let the streets fade, the lights dim, the air clear. The sounds grow softer, until only the rhythm of your own breathing remains. Imagine the last of the gas lamps flickering out, one by one. The city grows darker, then still. The rain begins again, slow, steady, soothing. It falls on the rooftops of houses long gone, on the cobblestones that once echoed with life. It washes the dust from history, leaving only quiet behind. The people of that world sleep at last in peace. Their work is done, their stories told. And the city, vast, patient, enduring, keeps its watch in silence. Life in a Victorian slum was not a tale of tragedy alone. It was, in its way, a hymn to resilience, to rise each day, to light a fire from cinders, to carve small joys out of struggle. That is a kind of grace. And so as you rest now, imagine yourself part of that long chain of lives, one among many, carrying forward the quiet strength that has always kept the world turning. The streets are empty now, the fog has lifted, the night is deep and calm. You are safe, you are warm, you can rest. The bells of London toll softly in the distance, their sound fading into the slow rhythm of rain. The past slips gently away, the world grows still, and all that remains is quiet.